Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Library Tour of Doom, where Lord Ganesha and I are putting your soul through torment on Earth to prepare it for torment in eternity. Don't say you don't deserve it. This is where we're going through the books in my library. This is a library tour, which is a library tour to end all library tours, because we're not doing one bookcase at a time, and we're not doing one shelf at a time, we're doing one book at a time. So we're going to need roughly 15 years. and yesterday we did a big treasury edition of Marvel Comics adaptation of the God of Thunder, Thor. And it's a great multi-part story where Thor first fights and then teams up with Hercules from Greek mythology. And I love it so much that for me it is a comic book Bible. And today we're doing another Bible. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the King James translation of the Bible. And this is the Barnes & Noble Leatherbound Classic Edition. And those of you who are familiar with the Barnes & Noble Leatherbound Classic Edition will already know how beautiful these editions can be. Barnes & Noble really outdoes themselves with these things. They are eminently collectible. Just eminently collectible. Who is it? Who is it in our little corner of BookTube who has a ton of these things? Is it Courtney Pickles? Is it Pickle Reads that has a ton of these things? Somebody does. Probably more than just one person does. They are eminently collectible because they are so beautiful. They're a little pricey. They're $20 to $25, but they're worth it because they are rock solid. And they're not. It isn't actual leather. It's leatherette. So you don't have to worry about that if that's the sort of thing that bothers you. But they have typically gilt pages. They typically have a built-in cloth bookmark. And there's typically a good deal of editorial oversight in them. They aren't just slapped together. That started off originally when Barnes & Noble bought the first lot of these things from the reprint house that had run them before, but then Barnes & Noble has added to them over the years quite a bit. And they're beautiful. If I cared about these things a little more than I do, I would have a whole bookcase of them myself. But some of them, you just can't miss. And this is the best of them all. This is the most beautiful one of them all. This is the whole of the King James Bible, which is the most beautiful. It may not be the best or the most accurate, but it is the most beautiful translation of the Old and New Testament. Just gorgeous. Just a gorgeous work of translation on its own that really pays you to read and reread for your whole life. But in addition to that, Barnes & Noble here gives illustrations. And the illustrations in here are Gustave Doré, the great illustrator of the Bible, Gustave Doré. And this edition doesn't have one, or there's Joseph and his brothers. This doesn't have one or two of his illustrations. This has all of them. This has all of his illustrations, which he did a lot. He did them all throughout the Bible. He did a whole string of them. It used to be once upon a time, if you wanted all of those Doré illustrations, you had to get Dover Classics did a big oversized paperback of all of his Bible translations with the appropriate tagline of verse at the bottom of the page, but not the whole text of the Bible. It used to be that if you were going to encounter a Doré illustration, it was almost certainly going to be, let me get it for you here. It was almost certainly going to be the one that the publisher bought, the one that the publisher paid for. Let's see here. Let me get it. Let me find it for you. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, man. There are so many that are in here, and they're all so great. Whoever it was at Barnes & Noble decided to do this. It deserves a free dinner for the rest of their life, because it's, yeah, there we go. Typically, that is the frontispiece of a book, of a King James Bible or whatever Bible, but there'll be no other Doré illustrations. This has all of them. And that is amazing. Just amazing. So this is a Bible to have, to really love. Also, because it's so durable, it's also a Bible to revisit. You can go back and revisit it plenty of times and without wearing it down any. Although, just as a precaution, I should probably get another one of these. And that is your book for today. It's a great volume on its own. The best. There are many Bibles in this little book room. That is the best of them all. And it's always it's sitting there on the shelf. It's always a reminder to me that I really need to get a couple more Barnes & Noble editions. I don't have as many as I should. They do a big, beautiful volume of Jules Verne, for instance, that I should have. And I could kick myself because the original Barnes & Noble leather-bound collected Shakespeare was amazing. Just amazing. It was the whole leather-bound book, and the front of it had the little brush-out portrait of Shakespeare, but it was raised. Just the portrait was raised off the cover. The rest of the cover was worked and embossed like that, but the lacquered portrait of Shakespeare, the little thing in the middle, was raised up a little. And I loved it. I loved the way that looked and felt. And I didn't get a copy. And then Barnes & Noble, of course, they're always going to have a leather-bound Shakespeare, a collected Shakespeare, and they still do, but it's not that one. And it's hard, if you go on places like, eBay or Amazon or something like that, it's hard to find a copy like that because the seller is almost always pulling a stock photo off the internet. A lot of times the seller hasn't really noticed the difference, but the second Shakespeare that they did doesn't have that feature. I know that sounds awful picky, but nevertheless, I have a collected Shakespeare that I love, but it's a paperback. I really need a collected hardcover Shakespeare. I should put a little more effort into finding that thing. I have the Riverside, the great second edition Riverside, but it's a little bit big. It's not a normal sized hardcover. But anyway, those are books for another day in the Library Tour of Doom. For today, it's the Bible. It's the King James Bible in that gorgeous Barnes & Noble edition. There'll be other Bibles, because I have other editions, and we're going to do duplications in the Library Tour of Doom. You have no choice in the matter. This has already been decided by Lord Ganesha and myself. So, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.